Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, as always, Alex, and with me tonight I have Logan.
Good evening.
It wasn't as good a result this week as we had last week with the two wins against West Ham and Middlesbrough. We went down 3-1 to Manchester City away from home, which is a pretty familiar feeling these days or this season in terms of away fixtures. But I guess there were positives to take out of the game. I thought the way that we bounced back after conceding that first goal was great to see. But how did you see it, Logan?
Yeah, certainly. I think it was probably a somewhat dire performance considering the form that we've been in, particularly at home in recent times. And I guess that we probably travelled to Man City thinking optimistically that we were a chance of maybe snaring a point. But I think it became pretty evident early on that Man City were very hot on the day and that it was going to be very difficult to get anything from it. And I think that they probably showed their class as to why they have the kind of money that they have and where they sit on the league table probably did them a lot more justice and showed us why we're in a relegation scrap and they're challenging for those Champions League spots.
I guess it was quite unfortunate in a way that El Mohammadi tipped in that first goal. He seems to be kind of around the mark, or he's always involved in those sorts of unfortunate incidents. I mean, we can remember the back pass to McGregor for the when McGregor picked it up at West Brom, for instance. But it was a pretty lackadaisical own goal because he wasn't under a huge amount of pressure. But the only thing I guess I'd say is I think it was Aguero who was sort of running in behind him, so he might have felt that he was under more pressure than he actually was.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I thought the same. I think it might have been Sane actually, there was certainly someone on the back post coming through, and it was a messy own goal. It certainly wasn't pretty on the eye for the City faithful. And I think from that kind of moment, I thought that we looked quite organised in defence previously or prior to that goal being conceded, but it was a bad one. And I think that as you mentioned, there was a brief fight back, and we had that chance through Nias, but I think as soon as that goal went in, I think the writing was somewhat on the wall.
I actually saw the passage of play leading up to that Nias chance again today because I think it was Rick who tweeted it out, and it was brilliant play, and the players just pinging the ball around, and City Man City that is, couldn't actually get near it, and it really deserved to finish off with a goal. So it was quite unfortunate that Nias just wasn't ready for it or didn't have his foot angled properly for that one. But do you think? I guess you said that the defence looked quite well organised, but do you think that we really missed Harry Maguire out there?
Oh, certainly. I think that the form that Big Harry's in at the moment, any club in the Premier League would miss Harry Maguire, and that's not flattering us because, as I mentioned, we obviously know that we're deep in a relegation fight, but he certainly wouldn't look out of place, I don't think, in any of the top four sides either. He's just in a rich vein of form, and long may it continue.
What's your take on his contract situation? I mean, my opinion, I suppose, would be that to tie him down, just give him any sort of terms that would keep him at the club. So, for instance, whether it's a 5-year deal and the promise of the captaincy or something like that, because he's certainly a player that you could build the club around.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think he has to be priority number 2. I think come the off season, I think tying Marco Silva down has to be our number 1 priority. But short of that, it has to be Harry Maguire. He's been fantastic. Obviously, he's still young, and he obviously is rated amongst the playing group to be given the captain's armband, which I thought was somewhat of a shock. But I guess that with the way that he's been playing, there's no reason to discredit it. So I think that come the end of the season, he's going to be probably the hottest prospect as far as what Hull City have as assets. And I think that some of the big boys may come calling. So I think that it definitely has to be a big contract. It has to be thought out quite well. And yeah, as you mentioned, it almost give him what he wants. But I think it is a huge priority that we keep Harry Maguire at Hull City for the future.
And then on the flip side across town, Swansea lost to West Ham 1-0, which I guess is a good result for us in the sense that despite losing to Man City, we stay outside the relegation zone. And I guess in that sense then, it's not too damaging to lose to Man City, and especially with getting that goal back late from Ranocchia, it sort of minimised any damage to our goal difference.
That's exactly right. It pains me to say it, but I actually didn't watch the last half an hour of the City game because I knew that the Swansea West Ham game almost seemed more important in proportion. And when Man City scored their second goal, I thought that it'd be better served. So I flipped across to see West Ham's goal, which was a cracker, and good to see Swansea with their heads down on the back of another loss.
And we'll move on then to talk about our player of the week, which is Sam Clucas, who has really come on in leaps and bounds. And he's another one like Robertson. I know when we signed Robertson, he was sort of scaling up the leagues at breakneck pace. But Clucas has scored in five progressively higher leagues over the last 5 years. I mean, when he signed for us, he signed from Chesterfield for about 1.5 million and actually scored on debut against Huddersfield. So had a pretty good start to his City career, and it's just kind of come on in leaps and bounds, scoring the 6 goals in the league last season, and now he's got one in the Premier League against his boyhood club in Leicester. And it's come on so quickly and so well that he's now getting talked about as a potential England call-up. I know at the start of the season there were a few comparisons of him as the English Kante, given his role in midfield and breaking down opposition attacks and that sort of thing. But I mean, he's only been at the club for a bit over, I guess, 18 months sort of thing, but he's almost become part of the furniture at the club.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think I remember watching, perhaps it was his first or second game in the City shirt, and I remember the fans were very critical. He looked slow, he looked off the pace, but obviously, as we've come to kind of realise, that Steve Bruce seems to have an eye for these young players, and he watches them for quite a while. So I think Sam Clucas was certainly an astute piece of business, and he seems to have just matured in his role. And as you said, the fact that he's been touted for England and all of these massive comparisons to players such as Kante kind of shows us the quality of player that we've got. I think he's probably been arguably one of our most consistent performers the whole season, and yeah, he just seems to have taken to the Premier League like a duck to water. It's great to see someone of his age who's kind of done the hard yards, and now kind of finding his feet in the top flight. It's exciting for all City fans.
And I mean, not being able to watch him week in, week out last season, I'll be the first to admit that when we got promoted, I really thought he'd become a bit part player in the squad or really not get much game time at all. So I guess in part due to the injury crisis we had at the start of the season, in part due to his determination, he's really earned his spot in the team. And I think I was talking to Dan last week. I think it was the Middlesbrough game that I first, or maybe even the West Ham game, where he's really just seems to sort of be dominating in midfield and really has his confidence and form up at the moment. And long may it continue for him.
Yeah, certainly, and I think that credit must also go to Mike Phelan for actually making that permanent swap, if you like, to play him centrally. I remember that it might have been against perhaps Sheffield Wednesday. Bruce played him there for perhaps the last 10 or 15 minutes, and he caused some real headaches for them. And I think that they obviously picked up on that, and he ended up obviously playing central midfield for the best part of the Premier League season this season, and he just looks much more at home centrally, if you will, than he did when he was being played out wide.
And such is his form that even though we've had Huddleston suspended for the last 3 games with that red card, we really don't seem to have missed him all that much. And if anything, when Huddleston's now available for selection against Stoke City, who we'll talk about in a second, it's almost Alfred and Dyer who might make way for Huddleston rather than Clucas, who's really made that midfield spot his own.
Yeah, I think that you're probably onto something there, except for the fact that I think Alfred and Dyer has actually been fantastic, particularly in the two home wins. I've been really impressed by his bullish kind of attitude to how he throws himself about in the midfield. It's just refreshing to see someone with such a high work rate. Obviously, a very different player to that of Sam Clucas or Tom Huddleston, but I think Alfred and Dyer has just been superb the last couple of weeks, and I'd hate to see him miss out this weekend at Stoke.
Well, we might start talking about the Stoke game then, as we've sort of started to do. And in that case, do you suspect that Huddleston might find himself starting on the bench, or how would you see us lining up against Stoke?
It's a very tough one. It will be interesting to see what way Silver goes. I have a sneaking suspicion Huddleston will walk straight back in, and I think that Alfred and Dyer will also play there. I think that Clucas may be the man that makes way, which will be quite surprising if we stick to the same shape. But I guess with the way Marco Silva might be thinking about our away form, he may look for a different alternative, or I'm not really too sure, but I think Clucas will be the man that makes way.
The only way I could see all three of them starting would be if we sort of played a 4-3-3 formation with Huddleston and Clucas at the base, or Huddleston and Giles at the base of that midfield three, and then having Markovic and Grzycki on either side of either Nias or or Hernandez, but I think he'd be more inclined to start Evandro. So regardless, I think one of those four central midfielders in Evandro, Clucas, Nias, Njai, and Hudson would miss out. So it's going to be an interesting selection dilemma for Silva, and it's obviously a relatively new one for him at the club because it's been. I think it's actually the most fit players that we'll have at any point this season. Because of course we've also got Henriksen who's been coming on as a substitute for Silva in the last few games and is now fit and may well be pushing for a start as well.
Yeah, certainly. I'm very intrigued to see the formation that Marco Silva plays and how we do set up against Stoke because, as we mentioned, whilst the home form's been fantastic, we're still yet to find that kind of breakthrough away victory under Silva.
Do you think this will be it?
I think that we're a huge chance. I think that looking at the games that we have left, I think that the Stoke away game, I mean, Stoke has been somewhat built as the Premier League fortress in the last few years with the thought that can they do it on a Tuesday night in Stoke. But I just feel that Stoke don't seem to have been offering too much, and particularly lately, their form's been well off the pace. I think they might have lost perhaps 4 of their last 5 or something ridiculous.
Yeah, I think they've
like
lost
that.
their last 4 in a row actually, and I think I can't remember which player it was, but somebody has come out today and said that it's a must-win game against us because if we were to beat them, we'd only be 3 points behind them, and all of a sudden the relegation battle would be wide open because there'd be quite a few sides suddenly finding themselves only a win ahead of us.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that they are there for the taking. I think that we've probably travelled to some of the more difficult places. Obviously, we had our Chelsea, Arsenal, Man City, United trips all in quick succession. And I think that we kind of had this idea that we were never going to get anything from those games. But I think that if we are going to if we are going to stay up, we are going to need a crucial away victory or perhaps an away victory and another point. And I think that this game against Stoke is our best opportunity for the 3 points away.
Yeah, and it's great to see, I think, Jakupovic as well coming out after the Man City game and really saying how the players are focused on breaking that away duck. And I think the players really are focused and up for it. And Stoke does prove to be the best chance at that. A ground that we've already won at this season because, of course, we played them in I think I'm going to say the 3rd round of the League Cup in one of Phelan's maybe first game as... Oh, no, I don't think he was permanent manager at that point, but it was certainly Marshall's first game for us in goal, and as well as Henriksen and Mason both starting as well. I think that was probably the first game after the transfer window closed, so we had a whole bunch of signings starting in that game. So it's quite promising as a game to look back on and really see that maybe not a second string side, but a very different City side was able to go there and get a result against a pretty much full-strength Stoke. Do you think that, I mean, looking at Swansea, for instance, playing Watford at the same time, do you think if we were to beat Stoke that would not necessarily secure safety, because of course there's still a long way to go, but it would obviously make things incredibly difficult for Swansea?
Not in the slightest. I don't think that having a 5-point lead with 5 games to go would guarantee anything at this rate. I think all it takes is to be a City fan for a number of years to know that we always do things the hard way. And I think that when we beat Liverpool the last time we were in the top flight, I think we were paying $17 or $18 to go down or something ridiculous like that. And we still managed to find a way to go down. So I think that you can't take anything for granted, as we're all aware. And I think that 5 points with 5 games to go is nowhere near enough, actually. Yeah, whilst it would be very handy and it would look quite nice as a cushion, I can't see it being. It can't even be. It's not even close to safety. I'm going to say no.
The only thing I would say to that is I think the big difference between that situation 2 years ago was, first of all, there was a team called Leicester City who I think, I can't remember the exact stat, but they won something ridiculous, like something like 6 of their last 8 or 7 of their last 8 or something like that, and really just blew through the lower reaches of the division. But in contrast, Swansea have lost their last 5 games and they don't have a win in their last 5 games and really seem to be dropping off the pace. And if we were to get 5 points clear, and if they were to lose to Watford and we were to beat Stoke, they'd essentially need 6 points to overtake us, which would mean that not only would they have to win 2 games to overtake us, but they'd have to win 2 more games than we would win in our last 5 games. And of course, we would have Watford and Sunderland both at home, where we have this imperious home record. So I agree, it wouldn't mean that we'd be safe, but I think it would certainly swing things quite heavily in our favour, and something calamitous would have to go wrong for us to not stay up. But getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, and as you say, it would be typical City to get into such a position and then still manage to stuff things up. Of course, I can remember the attempt at promotion in 12-13, where I think we drew or lost the majority of our last 5 or 6 games, where we only needed to win one of them to secure promotion. So a long way to go yet, but a win against Stoke would certainly get us off on the right track. What's your score prediction for the game?
It's very tough. I'm going to go 2-1 City, and I think that it'll be a late goal.
Late goal from
Yep.
who do you see stepping up for us? I would hazard a guess and say that it'd be a Hernandez maybe, who seems to have a penchant for giving us pretty important goals.
Yeah, I'd like to agree with you, but I think it's going to be Krzyzki. I think he's going to find his breakthrough goal, and I think it's going to be a huge one.
Fair enough. Yeah, well, it'll be great if he can get off the duck, and it'll be great to see if Markovic can back up the decent form that he's shown after scoring against Middlesbrough. So it'd be great if we can get both our wingers in on the action. But we'll finish up by covering some of the Facebook questions that we asked people to submit on our Facebook group, and we had quite a few really interesting submissions. And I'll actually start with one from our friends at Tigerlink, who are really great with sharing and spreading the word about this podcast, and they really wanted to get us to talk about the state of the social media at the club, because I believe the club was ranked the lowest in the Premier League and well down the list of all professional sporting clubs in England. And they wanted us to sort of discuss it from the point of view of an international sort of market, and how we sort of perceive the club's our social media presence. And I guess I'll kick things off. And I guess in terms of Twitter and Facebook, there's the obvious points to be made about the discrepancy between the club's usage of the club's name, whether it's Hull Tigers on Facebook or on YouTube, or Hull City on Twitter, and various other things. I think it's Hull City Tigers on Instagram. I'm not actually too sure. There's that whole side of things, which I'm not actually convinced is a huge issue from a social media and an actual getting the club's name out there, because as much as people say, oh well, it confuses people, I think when they see the badge, when they see the name, it conveys the same general idea. As much as I would obviously love to see the club just using Hull City on everything, but I think the main area where they could really improve things from an international point of view would be with Tiger Player, and actually getting radio broadcasts of the games free to access for anyone overseas. Because obviously when we're not in the Premier League, it's quite hard to follow the majority of games that aren't televised. So I guess that would be my take on it. But what do you think?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the Tigers player option, it is quite a good setup. I think that the highlights and the interviews and everything else that kind of gets done after games gets presented pretty well and comes across to us in Australia. Obviously, I know that you're and also Dan, we're quite big fans of watching the post match interviews and the match previews, and then also being able to check back over the highlights and remind ourselves of some of the key events. So I think that the actual product is quite good, and we do have access to it. But definitely the Tigers player idea of getting that radio stream makes a huge difference, particularly when a lot of the games tend to be a 2 a.m. kickoff for us over in Australia, making things quite difficult for even the most devout Hull City fans. So as far as attracting new people to the club and new people to kind of jump on the social media bandwagon and stay in touch with what's going on at Hull, it's a very hard sell. So I think providing that radio option on Tigers Player for free. I know that BBC Humberside is the people who call it through Burnsy and Swanee. I think having access to that for free would be a huge game changer as far as getting that access, particularly to us on this side of the world.
And I've certainly noticed that the Twitter account in particular is becoming a lot more focused on engaging with the fans. And I know that they'll put up reminders of old games and then ask people for their memories from the games and that sort of thing, and then retweeting the best ones and all that sort of thing. I've certainly noticed that in the last few months, so I do think that there has been a focus on trying to improve that. within the club. So I guess with Twitter, YouTube, and all of that, the only comment is about the name, and there's obvious reasons why that's um, not necessarily going to be the case in the short term. Though I would question why there isn't at least a consistency between all of the platforms, but I guess it is what it is. But we'll move on to one of the questions asked on Twitter, on Facebook about the club, and that was in terms of personnel if we were to stay up, and who you see as probably first out the door in terms of the player personnel, who you want to see staying at the club. We've obviously already talked about Maguire, and what areas you think we need to improve in.
Okay, so the first person that I think that I would be happy to see go out the door, basically because I don't think that they've kind of offered us really anything different, and they've also had a kind of injury spell, would be Mbakani. I don't think that he would be critical to the City setup. In future, I think that if we were to make a play and try and sign Nias, and if we were to hold on to Hernandez, and probably add another striker, I think that Mbakani would be certainly access to the fold. As far as who I would like to see, or who we need to strengthen with, I think that you can obviously never have enough attacking players, and I think that having Krasicki and Markovic has shown us the value, and particularly under the style of Silva, in having good wingers or threatening wingers, and I think that. Obviously, we've probably been left a little bit short in the wing back positions with Moses Otabajo, but I think that his return might leave us kind of comfortable there as well. So perhaps you could look at some more wingers, both in the forward positions and also to play our left and right back as well.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. I think there was an article in the Hull Daily Mail about the fact that Silva had recommended new deals for Maguire, Robertson, and also Timon, and I think that's a really crucial area of the field to tie down those younger players. I think if we can get Timon and Robertson signed on new deals, then that pretty much guarantees our left-back position for at least a few more years. On the right side, of course, as you say, if Otabajo can come back and be the same sort of player he was looking to be in the playoffs, that would be great. I get the sense that this may be Elmo's last year at the club, depending on whether we can find a suitable replacement. Whether we decide to sign El Abdelawi on a permanent deal, I'm not too sure. I saw there was links to Van der Veer again. I think we sent scouts to watch him play most recently. So whether we're looking at strengthening on the right side as well, that will be remains to be seen. I agree. I think we need to bring in a few more wingers. There was, of course, Saliba, who we didn't quite get across the line on the deadline day of the winter window. So whether we go back in for him in the summer and try and sign him as that right-sided replacement for Markovic, it sounds like he'll end up at West Ham, would be interesting. I think we also need a few more strikers. I think Diamande's time at the club is limited, and of course Mbakani won't be signed on a permanent deal. So a couple more strikers up top, presuming we also sign Nias, wouldn't go astray. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be a busy summer for Silva if he stays, and hopefully he gets the backing of the board, because he's shown that he has a decent eye in the transfer market and can bring in pretty useful players, because I can't really think of any player that he's brought in who hasn't done a job when they've been called on. Probably Labdalawi has been the poorest of them, but he's been in and out of the side, so it's hard to get too much of a read on his playing style and how much he can contribute to the club. But we'll finish off with a broader reaching question, and that's to do with the relegation battle. But if you could relegate 3 teams from the Premier League that aren't necessarily in the actual relegation fight at the moment, who would they be, and why would you relegate them?
All right, without a doubt, this is quite a tough question when I saw this one. Firstly, would be Burnley, because they seem to be our bogey team, although that hasn't been the case so much this season, with 2 draws. But obviously for many reasons, but I don't like Burnley, and I don't like playing Burnley because I have that sinking feeling that we will find a way to lose to them, regardless of where they sit on the Premier League table. I would also relegate Watford because I just don't think that Watford, for me, offer enough in the Premier League. They're just that kind of mediocre team with moments of flair, but I just can't see them causing any real damage. And outside of that, probably West Ham. I think that they're the biggest club or the biggest underachievers rather, for what they've got access to, outside of the Big Four, because everyone would love to see any of those large teams go down. And I felt like that was the obvious answer, so I tended to stay clear. Although if the season was to go for 50 or 60 games, Arsenal might find themselves in that position as it is.
Yes, well, that was going to be one of my three teams. I wanted to relegate Arsenal so that their supporters could see what being a club truly in crisis is like, see what they find enjoyable in the Championship. I agree with you. I would relegate Burnley just because I've got absolutely no positive memories of Burnley, and whenever I think of Burnley, I can always remember that scene from The Inbetweeners where one of the characters expresses his feelings about Burnley. And then I think for the third team, I would probably relegate Stoke, and I think if anything, that would be doing their supporters a kindness because they've just been mid-table year after year where the supporters, what do they go into the season hoping for? They've got this season they've got a slightly interesting relegation battle to kind of keep the supporters awake and interested, but most of the time they're not really challenging for Europe. They're not really fighting relegation. They're just kind of existing. And I think if they were relegated and had the excitement of chasing for promotion again, I'm sure they would enjoy that. And they're just another side that I've never found myself liking. They're looking a bit better these days with Arnautovic and Shaqiri and a few exciting players, but they came up with us in 2008-09, and they're just sort of a reminder of what we could have become potentially if we'd stabilised in the Premier League. But we've sort of bounced back and forward over the years. So I think those are the three I'd knock off.
I can't argue with any of them.
Well, on that note, thank you for joining me tonight.
Not a problem.
And thank you everyone for listening in. Hopefully we can get the 3 points against Stoke and maybe inch them closer towards that relegation place. So until next time, come on City. You've been listening to the official Hull City Australia podcast. For more discussion, join us on Facebook in the Hull City AFC Australian Supporters Group or follow us on Twitter at Hull City AFC Oz. The music was created by Amber and Black.
There's no turning back.